Hey there, designers. Welcome to Huddle. Got a super exciting episode for you today. We're going to be diving into the ROI of hiring for junior designers and helping you take a look at how you could sell yourself in those design situations. So without further ado, let's jump right in. For those returning to us today, welcome back. For those new, we are Huddle, the show where we dive deep into the world of UX design and help you take your skills to the next level. So today we are jumping into the ROI, the return on investment of hiring junior designers. And this episode was inspired by a Design Hires podcast. Yes, we do listen to the community as well as create content for the community. It's super important in our own learning journey. And that episode featured Jared Spool, who is an advocate for hiring junior designers through pipelines to upskill them through mentorship with seniors. This allows juniors to lighten the workload of everyday routine work while under agile and free up seniors for strategic work and building innovative features. So we know that the job market often runs into that chicken and egg dilemma, especially as junior designers, applying for these entry-level positions that require 1 to 3 years of experience. And of course, not having that experience under our belt, wondering how we can get that experience if we don't have that on-the-job offer to build ourselves. So we wanted to help you navigate and help ourselves navigate that as we go into interviews ourselves and apply for these roles. So just to jump right in, we wanted to highlight and offer some of the reasons that we have come across that you can leverage during an interview for explaining to a hiring manager why they might want to hire you as a junior designer. Cam, do you want to start us off on a couple of those?
So in the podcast that was referenced with Jared Spool, he generally just kind of approaches this subject with, if you were to hire a junior designer, you can build a team that actually has growth built into it. So you're going to be mentoring this designer to be someone that can take on some of these basic tasks of, daily design and take that off the plate of your more senior designers so that they actually have time to focus on the higher level, big thinking stuff. So they can continue to feel like there's growth in their role. So initially there is a little bit more time invested to bring a junior designer without experience on. And so the way I'm kind of hearing that and thinking about it, where there's junior roles and there's also apprenticeships. And what if we were to kind of combine those two ideas and build that into job postings? And we definitely should have some roles that are advertised as zero design experience. And I think that would be a really important thing for, big corporations and even mid-sized companies to start thinking about. So the general idea is, by putting juniors into your teams, you'll, train somebody to do things your way instead of having them unlearn bad practices from wherever they worked before. And you actually train someone from the ground up so that they feel you've invested in them, and then they'll continue to be loyal to you as an employer and want to stay working with the team that gave them their shot. So that's generally the way in which Jared kind of like advocates for us as juniors, and it just kind of made a lot of sense to me. I built a team of mechanics at a bike shop, and I can't just hire people that are making the top end of that earning kind of bracket for what you can make in that industry. I need to have somebody that has little to no experience come in and do some of those basic tasks that I can free up myself or some of my, more senior mechanics to do high level work. So it all just kind of clicked when I listened to that episode. And that's kind of the impetus for this conversation. So we've got a bunch of different topics or points to back up this idea that hiring juniors is good, which is totally self-serving. I think that's where we all find ourselves. But yeah, I want to, kind of throw that back to Meg and Mel. What are some of your perspectives on like the value of hiring a junior designer?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with your opinions on like how junior designers are gonna help with the entire team to really, ease the daily mundane from the senior designers, so both of the designers in the company can grow. I guess for me, another takeaway is how junior designers are always bringing this new perspective and new passions to the workplace, whereas it's something new. It's like young blood, and just everything feels so passionate and interesting for junior designers. I'm speaking from my own perspective as junior designer. Trust me, I feel so excited whenever just working in Figma or just doing the most tiniest thing. I still find that passion in it, which I assume like for more mature or established designers, maybe those are like too tiny for them to get that thrill. But for me, as someone who's still new to this industry, everything's like really interesting.
It's bright and shiny. Like,
Yeah.
give me some buttons to design, please. Anyway.
Yeah, I do
love
think
buttons.
that that's definitely a big reason to hire a junior designer, is that they will enthusiastically show up to that day-to-day routine production work that is necessary, especially under agile frameworks where you're usually working on 2-week, 1-week sprints, and you need that day-to-day pixel pushing and
Absolutely.
designing and stuff that, like you said, senior designers are not going to have maybe the time or the energy or the want to do, that might be burning them out on top of a workload that they're trying to do that is strategic and will focus on growth of the design team within the company as well. And that passion that you speak about too, that they're going to bring, that's contagious. If you are bringing new life and breathing this new energy into an organization where you can start questioning like, well, why do we do this? And why do you think this? And challenging senior designers to also think about the why behind their processes and the why behind their practices can also really remind them of the value of their work and breathe life into them. And seeing that passion can also reignite some of that passion that might have been lost in the mundane day-to-day routine work of the same production work that they might have been taking on themselves.
I really like that you touched on burnout specifically when it comes to those seniors. And doing sprints within Agile seems like something that is like clearly effective at, exercising an idea, seeing if it works, testing it. But seniors probably don't want to be doing sprints every week. And I think us juniors, put me in week after week, coach, like I want to do it. And having those senior designers slow down and think about things a little bit differently and maybe deviate from process where we're still learning process, and doing reps is how we're going to actually be able to participate in those higher level conversations and explore and deviate a little bit more. But I've heard it from a lot of senior designers how burnt out they are on sprints. So I still think, again, it's effective, but maybe we should be doing those sprints.
And it also, from a company perspective too, the reallocation of those senior resources towards projects that are strategic, that will focus more on growth and less on the day-to-day getting the product shipped out, is really where you're going to get the most return on investment for the company as well. Because when you have strong design, that's when you see all of the return on investment. And when you're just focusing day to day on shipping things out, you're almost working reactionary to the market. You're not able to really design for the future and design for growth. Something that you also mentioned earlier was loyalty and how that is generated also by hiring juniors. This is something that really touched on me because I've been working now for Lululemon for 4 years. They helped me in my development into design by allowing me to take a leave to further my education. And because of that, because of their investments in development for me, and because of the relationships I've been able to build with designers internally, that has really increased my loyalty for the company as well, and my want and my drive to stay in the company and to go for those roles internally and to try to create opportunities for myself internally. It's no secret that the company doesn't have a whole lot of junior talent on the UX level, and it's something that I know that they have wanted to do and have wanted to look at. And I know that's a similar drive for a lot of corporations that are looking at their talent and saying, we really want to expand our junior talent for that investment in the future. But maybe they're getting stuck on those short-term numbers of, we just don't have the money to invest right now, especially in a recession, on junior talent, because we are focused on, again, getting the product out and hiring for those more senior roles that they're really struggling to fill. And that is where this episode really comes into play for me in trying to figure out, when I'm going for roles that are there, or even advocating to create roles that aren't there, how do I sell the ROI of myself and the value of myself as a junior? And that's really what we're trying to kind of convey today as well.
Yeah, and I think specifically when I listened to that episode and Jared mentions that hiring from your customer and product support teams is one of the best places to find internal design hires. And that's,
yeah, absolutely.
Something that hit home for you, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had an opportunity to work in an ideation workshop recently with the product team, and I got such positive feedback from the senior managers. And it was a pilot that they piloted this ideation workshop. And it was the first time that they really invited support teams into the conversation. They said this was so beneficial because we don't normally get the same type of insight on our customers, because a lot of the time where they get that from is the research teams who absolutely do have access to the customers, but not from the teams who are hearing the day-to-day. This is the problem that we keep running into. We get calls about this all the time. I know, like, I have all of these analysis on what calls we get, what support infrastructure we have. I had to help build out that support infrastructure so I know what it means to accelerate convenience for the guest, and the ways in which we're doing that currently, and the ways in which our guests are running into problems currently. And by having that in the room, we were able to play off of each other more too. I was able to give them my perspectives on that from the customer support side, and they were able to take that with senior UX knowledge and be like, well, actually, have you thought about this? And I was able to be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Have you thought about this? Obviously I can't talk about specifics because that would be internal knowledge, but yeah, like, I think that's where that really comes into play.
And that was one of the things that Jared mentioned as kind of the biggest learning curve, is learning the users for a junior that's new to a company. And clearly you have specific insights that even their research teams don't have, which, huge asset. I hope they leverage that and hire you.
That's definitely the hope in general. But for those people who maybe might not have that background in a company, I think that it's just as valuable to, when you're seeking out a role at somewhere, maybe not to just blindly apply at all of the postings that come up. Think about, and this is not new career advice. This is out there on a bunch of blogs, but figure out, where do I want to be hired, and then figure out who they are serving, how they're serving their customers, how they're currently looking at that, what their customers are saying. Ask other people in your life about that. If they interact with the product, interact with it yourself. Learn the in and out of things, because that's really one big differentiator you can get when selling yourself as a junior designer as well.
I totally agree. Like, not just be the designer of a product, but like also be the user of it. Like, that really provides a new perspective on it. One example is, currently I'm interviewing for a designer position, and so the employer I'm interviewing with, they recently launched a mobile app. So I downloaded immediately to go in there to see like what they're doing and to really learn from it, and also like, give my own very own evaluation on the app. Is there anything I can help with? How would I approach the same design? What decisions I would make? Things like that. I think it's really helpful, like in terms of like self-growth as a designer, but like also standing out as a junior designer in the job market, because I wrote an email on my own findings and sent it back to the employer, and I'm still waiting for their reply. But for me, that's a huge takeaway.
Yeah, and if you're trying to gain those customer insights, kind of, a quick little hack, like reading customer reviews, whether it's on the Apple Store or the Google Play, or even just Google reviews for the business. Like you can find those tidbits of information, and like that was a tip that one of our educators at BrainStation gave us, is like, if you don't have a budget for research, like just find some time. Even if it's 20 minutes, you'll gain something. And, I did that for a project that I'm doing with a real client where, it's a retail store, but they are a business that have reviews, and I have access to that just because everyone else does. And that was really insightful to better understand like what problems exist for their e-commerce and who their customers are.
So just kind of to wrap up the problem that we are trying to solve, just to intentionally answer this, we're really looking at early career designers being unable to get the experience for projects at scale that the hiring managers are looking for. Of course, this is also because the entry-level stakes have raised since UX has first been adopted, and because UX is such a changing field and such a quick, fast-paced changing field, it's also something to really hard to define years of experience and what knowledge you have going into this. So one of the ways that we also explored in terms of how to hire juniors with little experience, or even how, from the junior's perspective, how to approach a hiring conversation, is really two-faceted. It's around selling your ability to learn, and selling what Jared has called the achiever pattern. So starting off with that ability to learn, because I know that is a really hard thing to tangibly take a look at. That is, I think, one of the reasons why we see these hiring practices where teams are asking designers to take home projects to do and solve problems for them and essentially do free work with the hope that you may get another interview. Mel, I know that you had an experience with one of those positions.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
Okay, so well, actually, I have like multiple experience with it because I was working in graphic design before, which is so common, like whether it's in graphic design or like in UX. Some companies, they would give out design challenges or take-home challenges or whatever they call it. So basically, they're asking designers to create a free design for whether it's fictional or actual campaign of the company. And well, to be honest, what I was learned from university, I went to OCAD, by the way, is that never do that. Never do any design or artworks for free, because that's unethical. That's wrong. But the thing is, like in today's job market, it's so normal. It's so common that employers use this method to figure out if the candidate is the right one, if that's the ideal designer they're looking for, which I think is kind of frustrating from the designer's perspective, that we have to create free designs to prove ourselves. But I guess, like, for me, a key takeaway from listening to the podcast Jared Spool was sharing is that actually there are other ways to prove ourselves as a designer. For example, like he mentioned a lot on how to solve a problem in a creative way, bringing this new junior perspective into a design process. Like, I think he mentioned that the question he would ask during an interview is that, is there any like design challenge, like struggles like you met before, and describe that. I was asked the exact same question for interviews before, and before listening to this episode. And after listening to that, I realized the reason why I was asked that question is for the interviewer to get to know how I would approach a problem, how I would solve it from a designer perspective, from like how I would do it creatively. And I think instead of giving out like design challenges working for free for company, why not just have more questions like that during interview process? I think that would be more beneficial for both of the employers and also the designers, because like I mean, if it's design challenge, like the company, they still need to have other designers and people on the hiring team to go over those design challenges, to critique them, to go through them. They're spending extra time on it. But whereas if it's just during an interview, it's just a question.
Yeah. And I actually pulled out some of those questions from the episode from Jared, and they're really, really helpful for both hiring teams who are thinking about hiring junior talent, but also for junior designers going into these conversations, thinking about how you can frame your perspective around these questions and being ready for them in case you find a good fit at a company that is looking to hire for this potential. So just going through a few of them. How creative do you get for solving problems? That was kind of what Mel was touching on there, the creative problem solving. Where do you go for resources when you feel stuck? Do you look for sources beyond the first one? Have you encountered complex problems that you aren't able to find an issue for? And what does that look like? How do you find and build relationships within an organization that you join to figure out who you can also learn from and who you can call on when you have a question? What are wrong decisions you've made? How do you quantify that? And then how do you fix it? So those are kind of some ways that you can start thinking about it yourself and answering those questions for yourself, so that going into an interview, you're able to be ready to answer that. But also for any organization that is maybe thinking about, how do I assess junior talent who might not have a bunch of work experience that I want to give them free work to do? Maybe that is a better way to assess their ability to learn on the job as well.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of companies have kind of found another way to solve that problem where, a take-home challenge, you could pay someone on Fiverr to do something and they would never know the difference. But actually having somebody do like a short contract where they're getting paid and you get to assess them more critically over a longer period of time. So maybe it's a little bit more upfront money set aside for this, but then the contract ends and you can decide to hire them or not. You can kind of give them like, this is a conditional upon your like performance within this contract, whether or not you get a full-time role or a longer contract, and they kind of like keep nudging you out further and further to be more permanent. When I was a mechanic and a manager, it was a standard within our industry to have you do a trial day. And there's a lot of jobs that do that. And, you might see somebody that just assumes that they get to take 15 minutes of every hour as a break, and you wouldn't know that in an interview. They're not going to divulge that. And that the working reality of an employee is as relevant as their design experience. And that's where, a lot of people hiring, they want to hire someone that, seems trainable and can learn these things, but you do have to spend enough time with them to understand that you want to spend 40 hours a week potentially with this person in an office, or just in Zoom calls. Are they going to be a loose cannon in front of a stakeholder? Like, these are things that you can't necessarily deduce in that interview. So I think that those short contracts are a very good way of like not stealing our work unethically by asking us to do work for free, and then actually being able to better assess an employee's fit.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think from my opinion, I think like the reason why a lot of companies or employers are asking designers to do those free design challenges, I think they were trying to figure out the technical skills of the designer, which I understand, because like not everyone understands design and people just like curious, hey, how can you do that? But the point is, like, especially for like product and UX designers, technical skill is not everything. It's very important. It's the foundation. It's the core. But it's not everything. There are so much more to it.
And I would argue that in
Mhm.
a lot of ways, it's also the easiest part to train.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
For
all
sure.
about like your ideas and
Mhm.
problem solving.
It's problem solving.
I hear that from lots of senior designers. Like some people on their teams, like they're not a good designer in terms of pushing pixels, but they have great ideas and their skills are just better utilized in other parts of the team.
Yeah.
And that's really what makes an effective team at the end of the day, is the diversity and talent, and being able to, I mean, I could speak for this very project here. We all have very diverse talents and bring different things to the table. And that's what makes working on this a lot easier for all of us, because there are parts that I wouldn't even, I mean, I can give an example. I had to re-record a certain part for an episode, and it took me several takes, and I still didn't get the audio right because we didn't have our technical expert Cam here to help walk me through that. But that is really the point of also hiring junior talent, is to increase that diversity of talent amongst your team as well. Because those senior designers on the team, or the mid-level designers on the team, they're going to have certain ways of thinking that's trained and familiar with their processes, and that new junior talent is going to be bringing in new perspectives, new backgrounds, new often we are coming from different backgrounds. I don't know very many people who right from high school went into a degree in UX design and then right into a UX design role. That's incredibly rare. I haven't even met a single person who's done that yet. So there's also that transferable skill, and that comes from hiring junior talents from different places in the workforce. I know when we had our hackathon industry day, I was chatting with Loyalty One, some of their senior designers after, and that was one of the biggest things that one of them kept touching on was it is so helpful and so easy to train junior designers who already came from the workforce from a different industry, because they bring all of this perspective behind them, but they also come with them with a lot of the soft skills that are really hard to train and really hard to quantify and really hard to get into someone who is just starting from nothing.
Yeah, it's incredibly relevant to kind of touch on those soft skills, because no one can teach you empathy. And if you don't show up as a UX designer with empathy, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, it's really about figuring out, too, when you're going into those hiring scenarios, extracting all of the skills that you can from your previous experience, so that you're also not just showing up to these as a junior designer. You're showing up as a well-rounded candidate with experience in other areas that are directly transferable to the role as well. And so you might not have 3 years of experience in UX design, but you do have the education and all of these projects that you have either started yourself or these projects that you've worked on that are applicable to problem solving, that are applicable to learning, that are applicable to upskilling, that are applicable to, and show that achiever pattern. Every year, did you grow? Are you taking on more responsibilities? Are you working on more complicated projects? Or are you a self-starter? Are you going and looking to increase your skills in a tool? Or are you looking at, how can I learn more? Who can I learn from? How do I get better? Because that is a type of drive, too, that will really get your return on investment for investing in these people, because people like that will be applicable to whatever role they show up to. If you're an achiever in one area, you're very likely an achiever in every area. And if you can both convey that to a hiring partner, or if you're a hiring team and you are looking for other ways to assess your candidate, that is really something that you're going to want to look at.
Yeah, absolutely agree. it's like different perspective that brings up the sparkle to the creative team.
So now that we've taken a look into some of the reasons why you should hire for junior talent, or as a junior designer, you should be selling yourself with junior talent. What is your guys' main takeaway? How are you going to be applying this to your own job searches?
Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, I hadn't really thought of the best way to articulate my previous experience. And so we're applying for UX roles. But one of the things that came up in, Jared's kind of opinions about hiring juniors was CX. And it's important. And like, okay, well, I've worked a lot of retail and I've kind of had the opportunity to affect a lot of change within that environment and that business. So maybe that's really just a way of thinking about my role as being more of a CX role. So, 5 to 10 years of CX experience and thinking about the way in which we can have a business impact based on, whether it was rearranging the store and putting products in a certain area that were easy to find. And the wayfinding experience within a physical space is just as relevant as, the information architecture and wayfinding within a digital space. So selling that angle is something that I've kind of had it all kind of click recently. And I'm not interviewing currently, but I am looking to in the next few weeks to start that process. And that's going to be something that I lean on pretty hard.
That's cool. Like how arranging a store is actually transferable to IA. That's a new perspective, and definitely see that logic going on there. For me, I'm definitely looking to the more visual design, the visual aspects, but also interlinked with UX, because I recently find out that I definitely love pushing pixels and working with color and typography. But what makes the whole design process even better is I understand every decision I make. I understand why I'm pushing that pixel. And that's the beauty of UX, to really get to know the decisions that are being made into the design implementations. And I think that's where I get super excited and passionate about. And yeah, that's for me at the moment, to look into the intersections of visual design and UX design, and also IA and a lot of decisions behind those visual design decisions.
I am going to continue to be my very pushy self and figuring out ways that I can advocate for this internally. While I still have the ears of some people in Lululemon, I've been really advocating for why we should be expanding to hire more junior talent. Obviously, selfishly, I have a stake in that, but also just building those relationships and figuring out how can I get creatively involved in things? How do I get on the job experience that I might not be able to get otherwise if I was external? But then also figuring out how do I leverage my previous experience so that I'm not starting from, 1 year. I'm starting from 1 year plus. And something that I've been doing is figuring out from designers with the same background as me or a similar background for me. So the journalists turned designers, or the legislators turned designers, the CX people turn UX, the customer support turned UX. What does that look like? How did you sell yourself? How did you convey the transferable skills? What were they? And that helps me really spark in myself. Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. I currently am going for a UXR role and UX research role, and something that I didn't think of is, oh, well, yeah, you wouldn't have to train me on research methods because I'm familiar. I've done qualitative and quantitative research for over 6 years. That's not something you would need to train me on, that you might need to train someone else on day one. So yes, I only have 1 year of experience of UX design, but I also have 6 years of experience of research. And while they may not be 6 years of UX research methods, the same principles of other research apply. How to quantify your research, how to extract the insights from it, how to communicate those insights, and how to then apply them towards a problem and explaining that problem, articulating that problem, and figuring out a solution. That is a skill that I am well trained on from other professions that I can immediately apply to UX research on day one from understanding that. And some of those other skills, some of those other tools that are a little bit newer to me are very easy to be trained. And so this has helped me a lot in a lot of ways, figuring out how to position myself in that way.
It feels like a great way to explain your experience, and especially with the qualitative and quantitative research, like that's going to be pretty invaluable. It's great.
For sure.
Well, I've loved hearing both of your insights on this. I think this has been a great discussion around this. I know it's helped me a lot in terms of rethinking about how to sell myself in the workforce as a junior designer, feeling a little bit more confidence to tackle those conversations and not coming at them from this fear of I need to hide the fact that I don't have very much experience in this field, and being empowered to just show up to those conversations and say, well, I might not have experience in this, but I have more experience than you can ask for in this other thing.
Yeah. And I think that we were instructed to think about spinning our previous experience when we did our kind of more formal boot camp, but that was September to December, and it's only just clicking now. And I think for anybody out there that might be in the same position, like you may just need to hear some other people talk about their experience, like Meg was saying, like digging up some of the people that she relates to a lot more is helpful in thinking about that experience a little differently. And, you know, it sounds very exciting to, you know, potentially be interviewing for that UX researcher role. I don't know if that's where you always saw yourself or where you always will see yourself, but you seem excited. And I think that maybe that's part of it, is thinking about your previous experience and how relatable it is. And that confidence is clearly there. That's great.
I think that is really a key to tackling imposter syndrome too, which is something that we definitely want to jump into in a future episode as well, is that if you can have confidence in who you were before you showed up to UX, how do you carry that forward into your role in UX and so that you can also show up when you do eventually get that role, to be able to bring to them everything that you're promising as a junior designer too, the passion, the ability to question why, and the ability to show up with new ideas, new energy, instead of being maybe scared and like you are just there strictly to learn. I think it's really valuable to learn, but also how are you going to give back, and how are you going to be able to show up with confidence and power to that role too?
Yeah, that's an important question to ask yourself for sure.
Well, that was a great conversation, and we're just going to wrap it up there. But if you have any thoughts around this conversation, if you are a junior designer and this helped you to be able to convey your own story a little bit better and your own ROI a little bit better in those hiring conversations, let us know. If you have any more questions, if you want any more insights around this topic, let us know. Give us some feedback. If you are still confused on the topic, let us know as well. We'd love to always know how we can improve these discussions. If there's ever anything that we're missing, please pass us some feedback. And if you are a hiring team, this is our call to action for you. Hire junior talent. We can't advocate it for enough, but don't just take our word for it. Take the many senior designers that we will link in the show notes as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been The Huddle.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Huddle. We appreciate your support and hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch along, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're feeling generous, please leave us a review and rating on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us improve our content and reach more people. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and exploring. Today's show was produced by Meg, Mel, and Cam, with help from Meg, Mel, and Cam. Editing from Cam, music from Half Cool. I'm Meg. Thanks for joining the huddle.